I'm Olivia, and I'm a musicologist. So usually I do the music research. So I write journals and probably like books in the future. What I do like in the music research is not just about the Western classical music, but also like world music as well. So I'm now currently a PhD student in the University of Hong Kong. So and we want like this webinar to be like quite interactive. So like if you want like to turn on your camera, if you feel comfortable, like it's up to you. And I'm going to share a bit like from the lecture. I actually recorded it already. So, but maybe like in some point I will just like jump in like in the middle. So yeah, let's. Hello everyone, I'm Olivia, and today I'm going to talk about Stravinsky, a composer of the present. Stravinsky is a Russian-born composer who has lived outside Russia, France, and the United States of America for more than half of his life. Celebrated as the most influential composer of 20th century art music, Stravinsky has marked the transition into modernism through his revolutionary works, The Firebird, Petrushka, and The Rite of Spring. So in this webinar, I will walk you through Stravinsky's biography and try to answer the following questions. What is Stravinsky's unique contribution to 20th century music? What is his ideology of nationalism? Igor Stravinsky was born on June 17, 1882 in Oranienbaum, now Lomonosov, a town near St. Petersburg in Russia. The Stravinsky family was of Polish and Russian heritage. His father, Fyodor Stravinsky, was a Russian opera singer of Polish descent, whereas his mother, Anna Kolodovsky, was a native of Kiev, now the capital city of Ukraine. She was a high-ranking official's daughter in the Kiev Ministry of Estates and was also an excellent pianist. During Igor Stravinsky's childhood, he was given piano and music theory lessons. Okay, so I think I'll stop for a while here because now we're talking about tension about Russia and also Ukraine. If you see like from the genealogy, we say, so actually Stravinsky is from a Polish and also like Russian and also like Ukrainian like background. So you can see here that actually Ukraine, like the people in Ukraine and also the people in Russia, they shared like some kind of like a very intertwining, like interrelating relationship with each other, like from so long time ago. Yes. In 1901, at the age of 19, he enrolled at St. Petersburg University and studied law and philosophy. It was during his university life when he started to show some of his early pieces to the composer Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov, who was the father of Stravinsky's fellow law student Vladimir. Rimsky-Korsakov was a Russian composer who was known as the master of orchestration. His famous compositions included Scheherazade, which was inspired by the 1001 Nights, the Arabian Nights, and The Flight of the Bumblebee, which is an orchestral interlude in his opera, The Tale of Tsar Sultan. Rimsky-Korsakov was part of the Mighty Five, established in 1860s, a group of adventurous young composers who composed Russian-style music inspired by old myths, epics, fairy tales, folk songs, and Russian dances. Rimsky-Korsakov was impressed with Stravinsky's works and accepted him as his private student. Rimsky-Korsakov held musical evenings regularly and played the latest music. Stravinsky was involved as well. Stravinsky's early works were largely influenced by his tutor, mainly in orchestration. Rimsky-Korsakov died in 1908. A year later, in February 1909, Stravinsky's Scherzo Fantastique was performed in a concert at St. Petersburg. The Scherzo Fantastique is a 12 to 15-minute orchestral work which Stravinsky composed between June 1907 and March 1908 during the final days of his apprenticeship to Rimsky-Korsakov. At the 1909 performance, Stravinsky's work came to the attention of Sergei Diaghilev. Diaghilev was a ballet impresario and the founder of the Ballet Russe. He believed in artistic future of all things authentically Russian. So in times when St. Petersburg was obsessed with Italian and French music, art, and culture, Diaghilev began to look elsewhere to create Russia's artistic future. He found it in Paris, which was the center of new and international art. He took a big risk by commissioning Stravinsky, who was then a young composer, to write the score of his new ballet in Paris, the Firebird. The Firebird was premiered at the Paris Opera on June 25, 1910. So inspired by Russian fairy story, the premiere was a great success that made Stravinsky known overnight as one of the most gifted of the younger generation of composers. Among the audience who came were Debussy and Ravel. This work showed how fully he had assimilated the elaborate romanticism and orchestra palette to his master, Rimsky-Korsakov. Okay, so here I would like to stop first. Debussy, actually, there is an account saying that Debussy even came to Stravinsky to ask about the orchestration. So he asked a Stravinsky opinion about orchestration. So I think during that time, during that generation of composers, Stravinsky was known as the some kind of master of orchestration. So that's one thing that we can notice here. The following year, in 1911, the Ballet Russe and Stravinsky collaborated again and premiered the ballet Petrushka, with Vaslav Nijinsky dancing the title role. The story of Petrushka was about the loves and jealousies of three puppets. The combination of two triads, C major and F sharp major, in Stravinsky music became known as the Petrushka chord. Andrew Wachtel, in his book Petrushka, Sources and Context in 1998, regarded Petrushka as a work that fused music, ballet, choreography, and history in a perfect balance. It resembles Richard Wagner's Gesamtkunstwerk, or total artwork, but with a Russian approach. Deliek and Lamb, in their journal, Stravinsky Ideology Language, wrote, beginning with Petrushka, Stravinsky was perfectly conscious of the conditions that favored the birth of a new organization of musical architecture in terms of time and space. And he was to waste no time in pursuing a large number of implications that would breathe life into the new processes. 2 years later, in 1913, Stravinsky and Ballet Russe premiered The Rite of Spring, Le Sacre du Printemps, at the Théâtre des Champs-Élysées in Paris. With the theme of Russia's pagan sacrificial dance, the unusual choreography suggested by Nijinsky, along with Stravinsky's daring music, it provoked one of the most famous first night riots in the history of musical theater. The audience cheered, protested, and argued among themselves during the performance, creating loud noises that the dancers could not even hear the orchestra. Stravinsky's highly original composition with shifting and audacious rhythms and unresolved dissonances was an early modernist landmark. So here I would like to add, so when you search, for example, for Stravinsky journals, I'll say that maybe around 50% will talk about The Rite of Spring. So when people talk about Stravinsky, they will they will go to this The Rite of Spring because of this very controversial, because of the riots that was happening. So during that time, for example, there's one thing that I would like to share. For example, there is this kind of if you see me in the screen, this kind of movement. Which is not the usual movement in the ballet, and some people even scream, "Go to the dentist," using this, because I mean the movements seems oh, you are having this toothache. So if you like to know more, I think you will find a lot of these interesting stories about this, The Rite of Spring. In Expositions and Developments, written by Stravinsky and Robert Kraft in 1981, Stravinsky wrote, I was guided by no system whatever in Le Sacre du Printemps. When I think of other composers of that time who interest me, Berg, who is synthetic in the best sense, Webern, who is analytic, and Strindberg, who is both, how much more theoretical their music seems than Le Sacre. And these composers were supported by a great tradition, whereas my very little tradition lies behind Le Sacre du Printemps. I had only my ear to help me. I heard, and I wrote what I heard. I am the vessel through which Le Sacre passed. This one, I would like to also mention that the composition, the music comes first before the ballet. So Stravinsky wrote in an autobiography that he had this Russian peasant folk songs in his head, and then that's why he wrote the music first before he actually premiered it for Diaghilev, showed it to Diaghilev, and Diaghilev showed it to Nijinsky, who made the choreography. In 1914, World War I happened, and it disrupted the Ballet Russe activities in Western Europe. During this disruption, Stravinsky and his family went to Switzerland. Stravinsky kept composing, but his works were dominated by sets of short instrumental and vocal pieces. These works are basically variously on Russian folk texts and idioms, ragtime, and other style models from Western popular or dance music. So his other works included The Wedding, a ballet cantata which is based on the text of Russian village wedding songs, and The Soldier's Tale, a mixed media piece using speech, mime, and dance, accompanied by a 7-piece band, septet, which incorporates ragtime, tango, and other modern musical idioms. In 1920, Stravinsky left Switzerland and lived in France until 1939. Age 57. So he lost his property during the Russian Revolution, so he decided to stay in France instead. He eventually took French citizenship in 1934. Pulcinella, 1920, was the first new work presented by the Ballet Russe at the Paris Opera after World War I. The costumes and stage set were designed by Picasso, which carried both the traditional commedia dell'arte images, but placed within a cubist design. Stravinsky used 18th century music as the source material, but twisted it in a modern way. The music is full of playfulness and joy. Pulcinella marked the beginning of Stravinsky's new musical language, which scholars refer to as the neoclassical period. So this one, I would like to make a comment because this is shifting from modernism, a touch of modernism, and then go to neoclassicism. So the story behind this is there was a World War I. So they couldn't do more of the ballet performance. So because of the war, and this Pulcinella is the first work when Diaghilev come. So the war is not really over yet, but already ceased, in a way. And Diaghilev came to Stravinsky and bring him Pergolesi's work. But I mean the account, Stravinsky didn't know that that one is real Pergolesi or not, and the account showed that actually it's not Pergolesi, but something from the 18th century. So the source actually is not known. And if you see from the background sound, the background music, that's Pulcinella. Here are the picture of Stravinsky and Picasso, and Picasso's drawings of Stravinsky and her music cover. Neoclassicism was a trend in which composers sought to return to the classicism aesthetic, which focused on order, balance, clarity, and emotional restraint. So this was the reaction against the flamboyant emotionalism and perceived formlessness of late Romanticism. Although in many ways, neoclassical music returned to the forms and emotional restraint of 18th century music, works by neoclassical composers such as Paul Hindemith, Erik Satie, and Stravinsky are distinctly of 20th century. So the music consists of dissonance, polyphony, and free-range chromaticism. Stravinsky wrote the continuation of music from the past. Stravinsky's neoclassical works included the octet for wind instruments, concerto for piano and wind instruments, piano sonata, and the serenade in A for piano. So here, I think like the dissonance and chromaticism are the things that make it like distinct. So it's not really like classical, so it's new, but it's being inspired by the past. So if you see like from the Pulcinella, for example, like the music right now, there will be like some like disturbance like in the middle, for example, something like something that actually like came like from the Petrushka or in the Rite of Spring. So those kind of things are make it like different like from the classicism. So neoclassicism means that it's inspired by the past, particularly like the 18th century music, but they put like new things on it. In 1926, Stravinsky became a devoted son of Russian Orthodox Church. He began composing religious works such as Oratorio, Oedipus Rex, which used a Latin libretto, and the cantata, Symphony of Psalms, that is based on biblical text. He also still composed ballet music with neoclassicism, such as Apollon Musaget, Apollon as the leader of the Muses, and Persephone. So the stories were based on classical antiquity, Greek gods as its subject, but with a contemporary plot. This was regarded as the reinvention of tradition. Apollon Musaget was the last ballet organized by Diaghilev, a year before Diaghilev's death and the dissolution of Ballet Russe. So in 1929, Coco Chanel provided new costumes for Apollon Musaget. In the age of 57 in 1939, Stravinsky visited the United States to deliver Charles Eliot Norton Lectures at Harvard University, which was later published as The Poetics of Music. In 1940, he and his second wife settled permanently in Hollywood, California, and became US citizens in 1945. He wrote 3 symphonies after his arrival in the United States to celebrate his arrival. Between 1948 until the end of his life, Stravinsky wrote 12 important sacred works, Mass, Canticles Sacrum, Requiem, Canticles. Even when he was dying, he was working on a Russian version of Lord's Prayer. So he died on April 6, 1971 in New York at the age of 88. On the screen are the drawing of Walt Disney of Stravinsky, a picture of Stravinsky with Robert Kraft, an American conductor who have worked closely with Stravinsky until his death, and their published conversation. Now we go to question 1. What is Stravinsky's unique contribution to 20th century music? First of all, Stravinsky enjoyed composing. Stravinsky was very neat and organized when composing. He used different colors to identify instruments or different strands of counterpoint. He sometimes even wrote in 3 staffs, which was usually 2 in the piano, to distinctly differentiate the main melody. So his everyday work was carefully dated. So in his words, his own words, the activity of composing is everything for me. It is for what I live consciously. I like to compose music much more than the music itself. I am at ease and the difficulty of composing, even in the difficulties, but I can wait, like the insects can wait. I am somebody who is waiting all my life. Although he was a follower of Russian Orthodox Church, it did not stop him in composing music outside of his religion. He said in 1948, I wrote a mass for double wind quintet and male voices. Although I was a Russian Orthodox, I want my mass to be used liturgically. But the Orthodox tradition prescribes musical instruments in its services. So I decided to write a Roman Catholic mass. Although it was full performance in Anglican churches as well. So Stravinsky was very open to innovative ideas. He paid attention to tiny details like the pauses, the vitality of rhythm, and expanded the use of instruments. The Rite of Spring, for example, there was a bass drum solo section, which never happened before. The famous French composer Camille Saint-Saëns was there during the premiere of The Rite of Spring. The composition began with bassoon playing high register notes. Nobody noticed it was bassoon. Saint-Saëns even asked his neighbor, "What instrument is that?" So in a conversation with Igor Stravinsky from the Wisdom series 1957, Robert Kraft asked Stravinsky, "Why is it that every work of yours arouses a certain protest from the public?" Stravinsky answers, "It's very simple. The answer is very simple. Each time I have new problems, and these new problems require new approach on my part. And the public has some habits already, has some familiarity with my old works, and they don't know if it's just a bad work of mine or a new approach of a new idea of a new approach. The idea of a new approach doesn't come to their mind." So in his autobiography, Stravinsky himself said that his early work, Firebird, was not too original, and that's why it was such a great success. So in Stravinsky Journey's documentary, Stravinsky Myth and Rituals, he said, "I live neither in the past nor in the future. I am in the present. I cannot know what tomorrow will bring forward. I only know what the truth is for me today." So Stravinsky is clearly a curious explorer of current times in terms of composing. So he imposed his stature, his adaptability, and his creativity in his works. So he was an active participant in the various currents during his time, traveled from modernism to neoclassicism, and turned his compositions into his own original Stravinsky style. In his book, Joseph remarked, "His presence defined many of the fundamental concepts, ideas, and attitudes, not only of 20th century composers, but of 20th century art. He captured the imagination of the age in a way that only Picasso and a few other contemporaries were able to do." Now we move on to question number 2. What is Stravinsky's ideology of nationalism? Stravinsky mastered many languages. He worked as a German-Russian translator for Hans Richter, a German conductor and a friend of Wagner. He would even learn a new language even before he arrived at a new place. So, for example, before traveling to the United States, he would write new words to prepare himself, getting ready for the trip. He always brought dictionaries with him. So when Stravinsky lived in Boston, he composed an arrangement for the Star-Spangled Banner, the national anthem of the United States of America. So he added the dominant 7th chord, which was a little different from the original arrangement by Walter Damsroth, a New York musician and composer, which was the standard arrangement at that time. So he performed his version of Star-Spangled Banner in the Boston Symphony Hall at the height of World War II in 1944. The Boston Police Department was not happy with the changes to the national anthem and wanted to arrest Stravinsky, claiming that Stravinsky had tampered with the national property. Stravinsky did not know that it was illegal, so although the arrest never happened, Stravinsky just created this arrangement to express, in his own words, "desire to do my bit in these grievous times toward fostering and preserving the spirit of patriotism in this country." So he referred to this grief towards the ongoing war. So Slim, in his article Stravinsky, 4 Star-Spangled Banners and his 1941 Christmas card, wrote, "The great Russian-born composer Igor Stravinsky had a way with national anthems. He made at least half a dozen arrangements of them for various countries. For no nation, however, was he its citizen in any accepted sense at the time he made this arrangement. In Italy, a visitor from Switzerland as a voluntary exile, he made one for Russia. So in Switzerland, an emigrant in transit, one for France. And finally, as a landed immigrant, though still a French citizen, several versions for the United States." So Stravinsky acknowledged his identity as a Russian. So in his own words, he said, "I speak Russian. I think Russian. and that you hear in my music, I'm a Russian, Stravinsky said in the documentary. However, he was never happy with wars. During his life as a global nomad, being a Russian-born but naturalized in France and the United States of America, Stravinsky was a person who was against wars. During his life, he has moved from place to place to find a secure place far from wars. In his own words, Stravinsky stated, "War can never be good for the arts. Musicians are mobilized. Life is deranged." So Stravinsky is a joyful man. He had some gloomy days. When his good friend Jean Cocteau, a French artist and writer, died, he was sad, but he believed Hildegard's saying, "To despair before God is a sin." So he has lived his life with a joyful heart along with his family and friends. To conclude, I can only say that Stravinsky was a global citizen who just wanted to live in a peaceful environment and explore music wholeheartedly. So I will finish my lecture with Nadia's Boulanger's word about Stravinsky. Until today, the present, Stravinsky is always unknown. People look backwards and admire him backwards, but they don't admire him in the present. And I remember the day he said to me, "Well, if only they walked with me." But when they are 10 years later, it is harder and heavy load. When a man comes with a vision which is so new, so personal, and so traditional at the same time, how could one understand him? He sees what we don't see. He knows what we don't know. He understands what we don't understand. Then little by little, we follow as we can. Thank you.